tomorrow with the rest of the conference content that you will receive a link to early tomorrow morning if you are registered for the whole conference. Okay, so now for our live session today with Laura. Farmers markets are one of the ways that small-scale farmers are able to sell their produce, meats, eggs, dairy, and other food products to the public. Today, you will learn more about the inner workings of a farmer's market and what to expect once you're ready to sell. In this session, Laura will cover different market structures, benefits and challenges of selling at farmers markets, and she'll talk about the laws regulating sales, including cottage food laws. And she'll also talk a little bit about the basics of safe food handling. So a little bit about Laura. Throughout the application of science-based knowledge, Laura Miller provides continuing education and problem-solving services to anyone who is trying to make some money in horticulture, from green industry professionals to fruit, vegetable, and ornamental plant growers. Prior to taking her current position as Texas A&M AgriLife Tarrant County Extension Agent for Commercial Horticulture, in March 2008, she was a University of Florida IFAS Commercial Horticulture Extension Agent for 7 years. So Laura has a lot of experience in this area. And Laura, I will turn it over to you. I know you've got a presentation up there for us, and I will be quiet and let you present.
Thank you, Becca. And please do ask questions in the chat. Becca said she would interrupt me and let me answer if I can. I really I enjoy speaking to people in person more than I enjoy speaking to people through my computer, but I know that we're all doing our best to communicate these days. So if you do have a question, please ask it. I'll really appreciate that interaction. Okay, so I'm going to talk about farmers markets today. And I'm going to try to advance my slide. Which, for whatever reason, there we go. Okay. Becca did introduce me, but I've been a farmer vendor at, yes, Becca?
I think you're not quite in presentation mode on
our no, okay. All right, let's try that again.
That's okay.
So what I see is my second slide, but you're seeing the first one, and
I'm just seeing your PowerPoint. Can you, if you go up to the top of your screen, there should be a little floating menu that falls down, and you can do a new share.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay, that might fix us here.
Let's do a new share. Let's see, where did we? What
there
happened?
We go.
But still I'm not able to move around. I don't know what's going on, Becca. Just a second.
That's fine.
Let me try.
If you right click on your presentation, that might give you some more options of things to do.
Okay. Let's see. But you're not seeing it move, right?
It did just now, yeah. So okay. Right now it's moving. I think we're good.
Okay, except for I, for whatever reason, cannot go backwards. Previous. It's not.
You see the little menu at the bottom left? You might be able to use that.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to use the little buttons at the bottom left.
All right, cool.
Okay. All right, here we are. So I did want to say that I've been here in Tarrant County since 2008, working with farmers markets since then as an extension agent. But in 2013, my grandfather passed away, and my husband and I began trying to take care of a family farm where we had planted pecans in 1989. So we had these pecan trees and they're in production, and we were wholesaling the pecans. But wholesale prices are not so great. So in an effort to try to maybe get a little bit better price for pecans, we started selling just pecans at the Cowtown Farmers Market. And you're thinking, pecans in the winter, but the Cowtown has a year-round market. So that was kind of how we got started in there. And now we grow about 5 acres of dry land vegetables and about 2 acres of irrigated vegetables. in addition to the 5 acres of pecans. And we recently planted this spring a 1 acre peach orchard. So we've got, you know, some different things going on, and the farmers market is our primary outlet for our farm products. So I have something for y'all if you're interested, and that is a really excellent book called The New Farmers Market, which has information for producers, for market managers, and we'll talk a little bit more about market managers in a minute, and then also about, you know, supporting farmers markets and what they can do in your community. So it's a really nice book. I'm able to give these away, compliments of the USDA's Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education effort. And on the SARE webpage, www.sare.org, there are lots of resources for small farmers. There are lots of grant opportunities for producers to, not large grants, but grants that will allow you to try something new or do something different with your farm. So if you haven't ever visited the SARE website, I'd really encourage you to do so. All right, so now you're probably wondering, well, if she were in person, she would have brought that big box of books on a dolly and passed them out. I couldn't do that today, but I'm happy to visit with you about your food production enterprise. If you'd like to come into the office and meet with me here, we could do that by appointment, or I can also visit you if you are in Tarrant County at your food production site. So I know that's probably not going to be good for all of you, but I hope maybe some of you will be able to do that. So what's a farmer's market? You probably have a picture in your mind of a place where a number of different producers, different farmers come together, probably on a Saturday morning, to sell their produce to customers. And customers can go from booth to booth and choose the things that they want, and they can get a variety of products in one place. Sometimes farmers markets are pretty fun. They might have some music, they might have food vendors like Becca's Taco Truck, and can serve a kind of a role in the community as a interesting and fun thing to do. Now this year with our COVID-19 situation, a farmer's market has been serving a little bit different role. It's primarily just a place where the supply chain doesn't get disrupted. You know, the direct from farmer to consumer sales are still going on no matter what happens with meat packing plants or transportation or supplies being stocked up, farmers selling product that they've recently produced directly to customers is a pretty quick and straight method. But there are lots of variations in the way that farmers markets are owned and managed, I guess. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So one farmers market type is a grower run and organized market. And that's what our North Central Texas Farmers Market Association, which operates the Cowtown Farmers Market, is. It's just an organization of farmers. They've got a board, they get together for an annual meeting, and they exist in order to provide a place for the producers to sell. Sometimes associations of farmers own space, sometimes they lease it, sometimes they're given space by another entity, but they govern themselves and set their own rules. Sometimes farmers markets are sponsored by a city, or sometimes like a chamber of commerce or an economic development office. There are markets like this in Tarrant County. They enter into agreements with individual farmers, or sometimes with one farmer who provides all the produce for that market. These can have a variation in structure and in goals. Sometimes they're created to bring people into a particular area, like a downtown area, to shop on a Saturday perhaps. Sometimes they are part of a larger economic development effort. And then there are private businesses that are called farmers markets. Sometimes these are not-for-profit markets. Churches sometimes have a farmers market that they host, or a food bank or another entity. And then sometimes they are for-profit businesses, basically produce businesses, sometimes that one farmer will own an outlet for their own produce and also sell produce from other farmers, or sometimes have other farmers come and sell. Sometimes developers of different types of areas, much in the way that a city might want to bring more people into an area, they'll want to bring more people to their development. Here in Fort Worth, the Clear Fork Farmers Market is an example of that. It's a developed area. They want to have more activities for people on Saturdays, so they have a farmers market. Veridian, which is a neighborhood in Arlington, had a farmers market. Other times a related business might host a farmers market. For example, a garden center business, not that we have one of those doing that here in Tarrant County, but in other places I've seen this, we'll have a farmers market on Saturdays where they have additional farmers come in and sell, and that fits well with their business model. So all of these different things can be a farmers market. One thing they'll all probably have in common is a market manager, and that's going to be the person that you as a producer need to get to know and contact, who can provide you with the rules and requirements for that market. And they can set different requirements for insurance or for where products are produced within a geographic region. Some of them allow reselling of products, some of them don't allow reselling of products. Some of them have certain percentages, and when we get to the certified farmers market by the Texas Department of Agriculture, they require that 60% of the products are sold by producers. The other 40% could be value-added products. You might say, like, we call them artisan products, like bread or salsa or something that someone makes and sells. So farmers markets can set up whatever rules they want. Sometimes markets will say, we're going to have one vendor for this and one vendor for this, and one, or maybe we only want to have 5 people selling vegetables and 3 selling meat, and that's within their prerogative as an organization or as a manager of a market to decide that. So they're all run a little bit differently, and it's very important to, if you're thinking about selling at a market, to get to know the manager and talk to them about what they're looking for. So what are the benefits of farmers markets? We're going to talk about this from some different perspectives, obviously for producers, because you all are thinking about selling at markets, but also for consumers and for the community as a whole. You can probably think of lots of benefits like that supply chain thing we already talked about. But for producers, one of the biggest benefits to selling at a farmer's market, as opposed to marketing your products in a different way, is that a lot of your marketing is done for you because you're part of a group, and that market is going to exist. That actual farmer's market is going to exist. So when you show up with your stuff, you don't have to worry as much about reaching out to customers. You should probably still reach out to customers, but you don't have to worry as much about reaching out to customers and finding those first customers, because the market will provide that. The other great thing about all kinds of direct marketing, whether you're farmer's market or a CSA or you're selling directly to a restaurant, is that you have interaction with your customers and they can provide you with feedback on your product, which is really important. Large companies have to spend a lot of money to survey customers and get feedback, but you can talk to people and you can say, you know, is there something that you would love to buy here at the market but you don't find, or are these sizes and quantities of products that I'm selling meeting your needs, or should I package this in a different way? You can get immediate customer feedback, which is really valuable no matter what you're selling. The big reason that most people like to sell at a farmer's market, and certainly the reason that we got into it, was that you do get the retail price for your product. Wholesale prices, just for pecans, for example, in shell, it could be maybe 50 cents a pound. If you sell shelled pecans at the farmer's market, you can get $10 a pound. So there's a big difference in the price that you can get. Now, to get from a in-shell pecan, I just pick them up, haul them into the wholesaler and sell them all and be done with it, to taking them to a sheller and having them processed and repackaging them and standing there at the market and selling them. I mean, there's a lot of time and effort involved, and you'll find that with all retail sales, there's time and effort involved in interacting with those customers. But you do get that price, that retail price, which is great. Another great thing for producers about a farmer's market is cash flow. You get paid immediately. Most of the time, your customer's going to walk up and you're going to be able to either get a credit card or cash or check payment from them that very day, which is really nice. You don't have to wait for that income. Farming already has a lag time. No matter what you do or what you grow, even if you're growing radishes and you can get them out of there in 30 days, you're going to have expenses sunk into your crop for a while. So getting that cash in is really nice. Another thing you can do at a farmer's market, and this goes back to the first point of marketing, you can advertise other outlets that you have for your products. So for example, if you have a community supported agriculture share, you can advertise to farmers market customers to support that. You could also advertise other markets that you sell at, or where your products are carried, perhaps at a grocery store or at a restaurant, and you can gain some real traction from that. And the last part is probably one of the most important parts for most people who enjoy selling at a market, is that you're building relationships with your customers, you're building relationships with your fellow farmers, which is also really helpful. And that's just a unique opportunity to become a part of a community and to provide those kinds of positive interactions. Okay. So for the farmers, it's a great deal. You get more money, get to talk to people, you get feedback. But for consumers, why do people want to shop at a market? Well, part of it's people like to know where their food comes from. Lots of people are very health conscious these days, and they're wanting to know about how their food is produced. Obviously, food at a farmer's market is usually quite fresh. It doesn't have to be transported. They say that your average grocery product came from 1,500 miles away. And if you think about it, when you go grocery shopping, lots of the food, even if it's grown in Texas, might come from the lower Rio Grande Valley, which is pretty far away. And much of our produce comes from California and Arizona, pretty far away. That freshness is a big factor. Another thing that people who shop at farmers markets want to do is support their local economy and support their local farmers. So they're able to keep that money in their community, which is another benefit for the community. And finally, just that straight supply chain is a real benefit, not just in the fact that it doesn't fall apart as easily, but also because that quick supply chain provides you with a little bit more simplicity in tracing problems. So food safety problems are often compounded by the fact that food can be grown in quantity and packed by a number of different brands and sold. And so it's often very hard, like for example, even something like romaine lettuce, which was our last big food safety outbreak, was very hard to trace back to where was the actual problem. So if you're buying your product from one individual farmer, and you should, I would hope not get sick, but if you should, you would be able to figure out what happened more quickly, and the problem can be solved a lot more quickly. So that's another positive of direct sales. All right, so consumers like farmers markets too. They perceive them as a great place to get locally grown products. This was a survey that Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Dr. Russ Wallace did in 2015, and they surveyed consumers to see where they would like to buy Texas grown strawberries. And as you can see, farmers markets was #1 there. ahead of even the grocery store. So people like getting their products at a farmer's market. And you can see that 50% beat all the other local direct sales options, such as farm stands or U-Pick operations or community supported agriculture shares. So a farmer's market's in some ways combines some of the great benefits of having lots of different products at your fingertips that a grocery store does. You can go to a farmer's market and get plenty of food to feed your family. You can't get toilet paper, but you can get meats and bread and cheese and all sorts of produce. So it's almost like a grocery store in its convenience. Whereas all the other options might be a little bit harder to get the variety. So people like farmers markets. Now, what are the benefits for the community? Well, all this kind of comes together, economic development, relationships, a space for events in your community that could be held to, promote community awareness or involvement, or often food security, food availability, which is great, especially in underserved neighborhoods. Sometimes farmers markets can be an important outlet for fresh produce in those markets. So for communities, there's lots of reasons why they might want to have a farmers market. Okay, so it's really great. Everybody wants a farmer's market. Everybody loves them. What are the challenges? Well, seasonality is a big challenge. This is a picture from Lubbock. You can see the Cactus Theater there if you know Lubbock well. And this is strawberries for sale in Lubbock in early April. Normally their farmer's market doesn't start up until June. So it's kind of rare to have a year-round farmer's market. So if you're producing foods for market and you don't have access to a year-round market, you're very limited in what you can grow. This market decided to hold some special strawberry-only markets, and they were a big hit, but it can be a challenge matching up when product is ready with when the market's ready for the product. So that seasonal production is always a challenge. These are just some different available Texas produce charts, and you can see that they're don't quite match up with North Texas if you're familiar with what we typically have, and sometimes they're kind of even funny, like raspberries. I mean, seriously, I've been all over this state and there's not a lot of commercial raspberry production, but apparently you can get it July through October. Anyway, lots and lots and lots of variation around the state when things are produced. Great examples, watermelons. We're just kind of now getting into our watermelon season, but watermelons in the lower Rio Grande Valley typically start coming off in April or May. So, there's a lot of seasonality, and so it's hard to have, if you're actually selling locally grown foods, it's hard to have the variety that some people will want and expect all the time. The weather. This is my slide for challenges related to the weather and having enough food for your farmer's market. This is a cold damaged tomato plant. Tomato plants also, as you know, since we've gotten up above 100 degrees pretty regularly, are not setting tomatoes anymore. So we have this little brief tomato season in the spring, this brief and glorious tomato season in the fall if it doesn't freeze too early. And the rest of the time, if you want to have a Texas grown tomato, it's going to have to come from a greenhouse. And in the middle of the summer, even that's impossible unless you air condition your greenhouse, which is not really feasible. So the weather makes it hard. The weather's also always unpredictable. I know you can say, well, it's always hot in the summer and, it's going to freeze this year here in Dallas-Fort Worth, but the dates, the timing of crop planting, it's every single year, it's exciting at best. The weather also has a big impact on people shopping in the market. When it's, this is from the ice apocalypse, but when it's a beautiful day, a beautiful spring day, a beautiful fall day, beautiful summer day that's not too hot, not raining, people love to get out and do something in the outdoors, like shopping at the market. Whenever it's cold, if it's raining, if it's just unpleasant in some way, it's harder to sell things outdoors. If you've ever worked in the retail garden center arena, you know how much like a rainy Saturday in May can set you back miles and miles and miles. It's the same thing with the market. All right, for producers, one of the big challenges is pricing. I don't think most producers do a really good job at this. This is a picture of farmer Craig Turley because he does do a good job with pricing, and I'll explain a little bit of what he does to get a better handle on things. Most producers at a farmer's market use what I would call competitive pricing, kind of the going rate. They survey the other farmers in the market. They might go to a grocery store and check out prices in the grocery store. And that's a fine way to price. It's not a bad way to price things. Definitely you'll be able to sell things if you price them kind of consistently with the other farmers and price them consistently with the stores. People will expect that sort of price and you'll be able to sell things. The next layer of management would be to go with cost of production. And the reason that this is really important is because to be a sustainable farmer, you need to be a profitable farmer. And you need to grow the crops that you know will make you money. The Veggie Compass is a free extension tool that allows you to, it's just basically kind of a fancy spreadsheet, but it allows you to put in input costs and gives you your cost of production for lots of different crops. This is really important when you're trying to come up with your crop mix. Back to Craig in the previous slide, he used the Veggie Compass very consistently for a couple of years, and now he's been able to hone his products down to ones that he knows are profitable for him. And that's really important in the long run, but it does take some extra work. The third pricing strategy is willingness to pay, which in some ways farmers markets do a bit of that. They're able to sell the product at a price that is based upon the value that people attributed to the product because it is locally grown and fresh. So they can sometimes price things higher than maybe an average grocery store or other outlets. The problem with willingness to pay is that it's hard to get at sometimes. And if you price your products above that willingness to pay, then obviously people are not willing to pay for them and you won't sell them. So that's kind of the fear of most people with that. But that is the way to get the highest price for your product. The next pricing strategy is skimming, which means you sell the product at a high price to the people who are willing to pay for it, and then you lower the price, and then you lower the price. I don't really admire that as a pricing strategy. I'd have to say that it's used in other industries right now. If you subscribe to a newspaper like the Star Telegram, they recently, well, let's raise our prices and see if people are willing to pay. If you call them up and say, I'm sorry, I'm canceling my subscription because the price just tripled, they'll say, oh, wait a minute, we've got a deal for you. Let's, that's skimming pricing. The last one is pricing load to get into a market and then raising your price later. That's not a good strategy for a farmer's market because it's not a community building strategy. And I would highly discourage anyone who wants to sell their products in a group with other farmers from trying a penetration market strategy. It's undercutting the rest of the market, and that's bad for the market as a whole. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about pricing. If you want to sell things by weight in the state of Texas, whether it's barbecue or produce, you have to use a legal for trade scale that is registered with the Texas Department of Agriculture and inspected. So most small farmers are not doing that. And their workaround is typically selling things by volume and unit. And that's actually a great way to have really flexible pricing, because you can say, you know, this basket of purple hull peas is priced at this price. And you can kind of be flexible with that price. You can also be flexible with the volume of things that you sell. If you want to have different price points, you can do that. If you want to have a $5 basket of peas and a $10 basket of peas, you can create that quite easily, and you can set those volumes. Sometimes you can sell it by the unit, by the piece. You want to sell a watermelon for $5 or $10. You can sell a watermelon for however much you want to sell it. And that's the way that most small farmers that sell at farmers market price things. Exceptions you'll see are typically meat, because it's packed in a packing house and labeled at that point on a certified scale. So you typically, when you buy meat at a farmer's market, it will have been officially weighed. Okay, challenges for new farmers. Gosh, there's just so much to learn about farming. I think that's what makes the big difference. In this picture, you can see farmer Johanna Storm holding the strawberry plant up there. We're at her farm. She has worked so hard and learned so much. On the right, you can see farmer Jonathan Rodrigues. He comes from a farming family, but he is an independent farmer at age 19, which is really impressive, but there's just a lot to learn. And so it's challenging as a new farmer going into a farmer's market, because you'll be not exactly competing, but you'll have to hold your own with some experienced farmers, and so that's a real challenge. A good farmer's market has at least an unofficial kind of mentoring system to help new farmers get into the market. Another one of our challenges, and I was on another meeting this morning where we were talking about some different issues, but the average age of farmers in the United States is 57 years of age. Texas is actually slightly higher than that at about 59 years per age. This is John Doak. He has passed away since I took this picture 2 years ago, but he was 89 years of age when I took this picture and still farming peaches. It's challenging though. I think I'll be an old farmer at some point if I'm fortunate enough to live a long time, but it's, you know, there are some challenges there in kind of keeping up with what's new and the times and connecting with new customers. It's all hard, but you tend to have young farmers and old farmers and not a lot of in-between farmers, because it's something that people often do as a kind of second career or a sideline career. But lately, people have been more enthusiastic about getting into farming as young people, I think. I think that's kind of part of our times these days. Professionalism is also a challenge at the farmer's market. You've got to keep things clean. You've got to be polite and friendly. You need to look professional. This is B&G Garden, and they look pretty good with their matching t-shirts and their names, and they've got everything labeled and clean, and creating a nice display is another challenge of selling at a farmer's market. You basically, if you think about it, you have to build your retail store each and every time you go to market. And if you think about that, it's a bit of work to make it look good, to make sure that all your employees are well trained and knowledgeable. It's not easy. This was a survey that Dr. Marco Palma at Texas A&M, Texas Percentage M University did in 2010. Why do customers quit coming to a horticultural business? This was primarily garden centers. But the number one reason was the indifferent attitude of employees. So one thing that we know people are looking for at a farmer's market is they're looking to talk to a farmer and they want to meet a nice, friendly farmer. So it's a big part of your job as a farmer's market farmer is to be friendly, to be willing to talk about your farm and the way that you do things, and to care about their concerns and desires about the produce that they're producing, about the produce that they're purchasing. So it's a really key to being a successful farmer's market vendor. As you go on down there, you see that the product and the price are not as important as the feeling that the person selling to them cares about them. All right, another challenge for farmers markets. The numbers of farmers markets, and this actually is kind of cut off, but it goes from 1994 to 2017, I believe. You can see that the number of farmers markets has steadily increased, and now it's kind of plateaued out in the United States, but a 21%, a 0.21% increase in the last years in this that were measured. It's becoming difficult to establish new farmers markets. I would say that there are probably more people trying to get a farmers market going in the Fort Worth area for sure than there are actually farmers or customers probably. Now I wouldn't say customers in terms of like actual numbers of people who eat in the community, because there's plenty of those, but there's a limited number of especially farmers that can sell at a farmer's market. So it's kind of hard to make a splash in that market now. And then this is the other big challenge. Everybody wants to have a farmer's market on Saturday morning. And of course that makes sense. Most people don't have to work on Saturday. They're looking for something to do. It's the kind of time when they might want to experience going out and shopping at a market. But Saturday morning is only one small time period each week. So there's a challenge in the timing. All right, so let's say you want to sell in a market. What do you need to do? Well, you want to find and survey the markets that you're considering, meet the market manager at the market, talk to them, talk to the other farmers, see if it might be a good fit for your products. Then you kind of need to know the laws and the requirements to sell, and those are pretty reasonable for fresh produce. And then finally, set a realistic timeline for yourself, decide when you're going to try to enter the market, and also how you're going to start out small and your plan for growth. So farmers markets, you can look at a lot of different places. If you're not familiar with the markets in your community, go Texan.org has the certified farmers markets. Localharvest.org has also listings of farmers markets. When you're thinking about selling at a market, you've got to kind of know what your value proposition is. What do you bring to that market? Maybe it's more crops. Maybe it's something different that's not sold at the market. Maybe you're really good at growing tomatillos and nobody's selling them, or something different. Maybe you're able to grow more cultivars of something because you're willing to mess with it. It's kind of worked out that we can grow, this is my market table, we can grow squash pretty well. So you can see right there, I guess, 1, 2, 3, 4 different cultivars of squash, but we actually have 8 growing in the field right now. So, you know, we can provide a lot of variety there. Craig Turley that I showed you before grows lots of different kinds of peppers. He grows 6 or 7 different kinds of peppers because he likes to grow peppers. He can grow them well. Having variety in cultivars is great. Season extension is another thing you might be able to bring to the market, not just because you're able to grow crops that are out of the typical seasons, but also maybe because you use some kind of season extension technology, like a high tunnel where you protect it from the cold, or some other method of extending your season, or you have a greenhouse and you grow transplants and you get them out, or you're willing to do something to kind of extend the seasons on different ends. Value-added products are another thing to bring to the market. Just being direct to consumer and locally grown is a value that you're adding to your product, but we often think of value-added products as something that is processed or improved in some way. The fact that we can shell your pecans, you can see the pecans down on the end, that's adding value to the consumer. So sometimes processing adds value. Making jelly or salsa or pickles adds value. So we'll talk more about those cottage foods. And finally, you bring your friends and family, you bring your contacts, you bring your community to the market, and that's more customers for everyone. Becca, do you have something?
Yes, we have a question. So we have a question from Kelly. She wanted to know if there were such things as mobile farmers markets, or if they're tied to a location. And Michelin did pop in to let us know that, yes, there are things like veggie vans. But you can tell us more about what that market might look like.
So sure. So a farmer's market could be mobile. And markets like the North Central Texas Farmers Market Association right now is doing, in cooperation with the food bank, a farmers market nutrition program where they go to different neighborhoods and set up markets in different locations. You could also have something like a actual, I've seen a school bus as a mobile farmers market. So yeah, that's possible. It is complicated though, because you've got to have those locations you've got to work with a number of different locations to do that. So it's possible. Certainly that's a business model that hasn't been explored as much, at least around here, as it could be. All right, so if you're thinking about selling in a farmer's market, you've got to take a really good inventory of your resources in some ways. Your production space, how much room do you have to produce on? The less space you have, the more intensively you have to produce, and really truthfully, the better manager you have to be to get the most out of that small space. Equipment. And equipment is always a problem for small scale farmers. This is a modification of a horse-drawn plow that the farmer has modified so that he can pull it with the tractor. You can see the tractors in the background, but it's an actual old horse-drawn piece of equipment, but it's small enough, this is a tomato farmer, to provide the size that he needs. There is special equipment for small farmers. There's seeders that are great. There's tillers that you can use that are smaller, but it's a challenge. Labor is also a challenge. Most small farmers are kind of, one person, one family operation. Some do have some employees, but farming is very labor intensive. Especially all kinds of fresh produce are very labor intensive to harvest. The harvest timing is usually very critical. If you grow, for example, okra or asparagus, you have to harvest every day or the product will get past its reasonable selling point. So labor is a big challenge. You do need some kind of cold storage. Many people have just, extra refrigerator or something like that. There's a mechanism called a cool bot that's widely available and often used by small farmers to take a window unit air conditioner and run it at about 40 degrees Fahrenheit so that you can create a cold room. You usually build an insulated kind of closet or cabinet and then run the cool bot, and that will create a cold storage room. But almost all produce really does need to be stored cool. You need all the things for your store, your sales and display space. You've got to be able to keep that clean. You've got to be able to handle money while still handling food in a clean manner, and that's challenging. You also have to be willing to talk to people. It's hard. I mean, sometimes you don't have time for all the questions that you might get, but you've got to be willing to talk to people. That is one thing that people expect in a farmer's market, is having someone to talk to. And finally, you've got to be able to have, in my opinion, some product liability insurance. Some farmers markets will require this, some won't, but it's a really important thing to have if you have some assets that you need to protect in the event of product liability. And like most kinds of insurance, if you're fortunate, you'll never have to use it. All right, so what do you need to know? What do you need to educate yourself about in terms of rules and regulations? Couple of things. Food safety is the biggest concern for selling food products, obviously. And the rules and regulations are all pretty much about food safety. Otherwise, our laws make it really easy to sell farm products. They're looked upon favorably. You don't have to pay sales tax for foods. Local health departments can regulate farmers markets. The Cottage Food Law was actually a way to make it easier to sell value-added products, but it does have some rules. You should definitely ask questions about any individual market, because they can set their own requirements. So really quickly, food safety is the key thing that you need to be sure that you're able to do. Most of the problems that we have, most foodborne illnesses, are caused by contamination with fecal material. They're either human or animal pathogens that live in digestive systems. E. coli, salmonella, most of our serious food safety pathogens are contaminants. Listeria is the exception because it lives in the soil. It's also kind of strange whenever there's a listeria outbreak, because it's also not as temperature sensitive as the others. You may recall the Bluebell ice cream listeria, it can live at cold temperatures. But you've got to be able to maintain sanitary practices. Most of the pathogens are spread in water, so the way that you clean things and keep things dry and cool is going to be key to being successful. You have a question, Becca?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So the question is, this may be two different questions, but are there regulations against using like harvested rainwater on edible crops for sale?
Good question. Not for irrigation, not at all. Now for washing crops for sale, it is recommended that you use potable water, so water that's been treated to drinking water standards, but not for irrigation, no. Irrigation is challenging, and I'm going to mention very briefly the Food Safety Modernization Act, but surface waters, which are some of the available waters that we have, are more likely to be contaminated with generally, by livestock or wildlife. Well water is safer in terms of food safety because it's down in the ground and less likely to be contaminated. Rainwater can also be contaminated from wildlife and livestock, but it's not a problem unless it's actually on the food itself. So, the plant, for example, a tomato plant, the tomatoes are typically never on the ground. They're never going to be contaminated by irrigation water. Other crops are obviously going to be on the ground, and they could be contaminated by irrigation water. Farmers markets can make their own rules in terms of like what kinds of licenses you might need to have, or where the area you could produce in. and that's really an important thing to know. But it's also, I think, quickly important to know that our laws favor the sale of whole uncut produce with very little regulation or limitations on that. There's no sales tax on food products. There's no requirements really in many ways for those sales. So this is the Department of State Health Services, which does regulate food sales. Their key terms are the location, and what does that mean? So I would think in a mobile market, you might have to get different locations approved. The definition of a farmer or producer, and then the definition of food, which is right there. And this last part, potentially hazardous food, these are things that are more likely to have problems, and foods that must be under temperature control for safety. So things that have to be refrigerated at a certain temperature are much more regulated. Okay, so potentially hazardous foods are just anything that supports the growth of bacteria or the production of toxins by bacteria like aflatoxin. Most of them contain protein, water that supports bacterial growth. They're going to have a neutral or slightly acidic pH, but more on the neutral side. And then they have to be held at a certain temperature. Becca, you got a question?
I do. So a follow-up to the rainwater question, and this, we might be able to follow up afterwards with this as well. Do you know if there's a written policy anywhere? She's looking to write a policy as far as what they can do with the rainwater, whether it has to be drip irrigation versus overhead irrigation. Is there a good resource for that somewhere that she could reference?
Oh, there's a ton of stuff in the Food Safety Modernization Act, but and probably I would go to that, even though it wouldn't apply to a small farm, but I would go to that and kind of look at the way that they word things. So that would be where I would start. And I will have a link to that in a future slide. Okay, we're going to talk about the Cottage Food Production Operations Law. Went into effect in 2011. It was amended and made a little bit broader in 2013, which basically it allows an individual to produce and sell certain food items from their home or at specific locations. Things that previously you had to produce in a commercial kitchen, you can produce in a home kitchen. This is a boon to, you know, home bakers and other people. Gross sales cannot exceed $50,000 annually. So there's a limit on that. It's designed for people who want to have a secondary income out of their home. It's not regulated by local or state health department, does not require a permit or a license. Your home will not be inspected unless there's a complaint or a problem. And it does require a food handler's card for those who prepare the product. Now, some farmers markets will require a food handler's card for all vendors. That's not an unusual requirement. You can easily take the food handler certification course, which is all about food safety. For $15, it takes 2 hours, and the certification lasts for 2 years. So that's a good thing for anybody who wants to either produce foods under the cottage law or just to work to sell foods at a farmer's market. This will help you follow good food safety procedures. Okay, so under the cottage food laws, back to that, these are the not potentially hazardous foods that you can produce and sell. One little caveat about candy: all other food is not subject to sales tax, but candy, because it's, you know, not as good for you, is subject to sales tax. So if you do sell any kind of candy, you would need to collect taxes on that. But you can see a lot of familiar products, pickles, jams and jellies. All of those things are covered under this law. Baked items that don't require refrigeration. In the big picture, the Food Safety Modernization Act is a recently, it's still being implemented, but it does have exceptions for smaller farmers based upon annual sales. And in this Food Safety Modernization Act, that sales threshold depends upon what portion of your sales are sold directly and what portion are sold wholesale. There's more concern about food safety in the wholesale supply chain. So if you sell more than half of your product directly to consumers such as at a farmer's market or directly to a restaurant or through a CSA or at a farm stand, then you're exempt at a higher level of sales than if you sell all your products through wholesales. And all the details are there. It's a lot to read. I would highly recommend at least becoming kind of familiar with things in the Food Safety Modernization Act, even though they're not going to apply to most small farmers. Organic production practices and yes.
All right, we have a question about selling houseplants at farmers markets. Is that allowed or is that problematic?
It's probably allowed, but it's also taxable because they're not food. So that's one point. A lot of farmers will sell vegetable transplants, for example, and those are not taxable. But if you were to sell some, garden flowers transplants, then those would be taxable. So, and it just depends upon the market itself if they wanted to have like a houseplant vendor or not, so they might say, yeah, we'd like to have that or maybe not, but it would be taxable. Organic production. So as you probably know, to use that beautiful green and white USDA organic symbol and to call your products certified organic, you must be certified and follow the USDA's rules for organic production. A lot of small farmers don't, even though they might follow the rules, which is anyone can follow the rules if they want to, they might not pursue certification because it is a challenge in terms of record keeping, management. There's costs associated with inspection and maintaining your certification that they don't feel are valuable to them. I would say when you're selling directly to consumers, it's okay to be able to answer their questions about how you produce things directly and not have to have that third party coming in and saying, yeah, this is valid, this is why we certified it. But if you are going to sell wholesale and you want to sell wholesale as an organic farmer, then your customer is going to require that you are certified to be able to state that. So for most small farmers that sell directly to consumers, they don't pursue organic certification. In the North Central Texas Farmers Market Association, I think we only have maybe 1 or 2 certified organic farmers. Most of them, even though many of them follow those practices, are not certified. Okay, so under the Food Safety Modernization Act, sorry, Becca, go ahead.
Yeah, one follow-up on the houseplant or flower sales. Would you need a floral permit or a nursery?
Yes, you would. Yes, you would need a nursery floral permit from the Texas Department of Agriculture. That's the other thing you'd need. Yep, absolutely. Okay. Food Safety Modernization Act has a really interesting list. These are the things that are not regulated because they say they're rarely consumed raw. Now, I don't know about you, but I eat raw asparagus, I eat raw sweet corn, I eat raw dill, I eat, but anyway, these are the products that are rarely consumed raw. So, but basically it kind of gives you a feeling for which things are just, even if you're not governed by the Food Safety Modernization Act, but which things are generally considered to be less of a food safety risk. And this is a pretty interesting list. But anyway, also eat pecans raw, y'all. But anyway, there it is. So quick summary on rules and regs of food safety. And this is something that there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to study. I can't really get into all of it, but you need to know the basics: hand washing, sanitation, using chlorinated water for washing instead of your irrigation water, which is probably not treated. All of those things are key in food safety. Keeping things dry and cool is very, very important. Markets can make their own rules. They can be stricter. They can be, well, obviously they have to follow the basic requirements, but there's not a lot of those. So they can be stricter than that. And fresh produce and all kinds of food and even vegetable transplants can be sold without the collection of sales tax. All right. So how can you learn more? Well, come see me and we can talk. We can answer all your questions. I'd love to visit with you. I do think that selling at farmers markets is a great way to do something good for yourself as a producer, for your customers who can benefit from that direct connection, and for your community too. So it's really a good thing for everybody. This is my supper. So I had tomatoes, I had squash, because I have to eat squash every day during squash season, and I had basil. But these are all things, and the cheese from the farmer's market, these are all things you could get at your farmer's market. You can have beautiful meals. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and please don't hesitate to follow up by phone or email. I'm always happy to hear from people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. Is this contact information on this slide the same for contacting you about the book?
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. We have some people asking about the book, so that's wonderful.
Okay. All right.
Well, I thought this was a wonderful session. If anybody else has any final questions, feel free to put those in the chat box. We do have one more live session today at 3 p.m. And that will be Lauren with talking about problems and possibilities at community gardens. So lots of good areas for conversation there. I know I learned a lot about farmers markets today, and very happy to have you with us, Laura. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Becca.
Yeah.